So this video is going to be about Micah, martinkus, hopan, and Greenway. And I've shared this video before, but I don't think I've shared enough details that gives a good understanding to what's going on. Okay, I understand hopan is no longer alive. He was a friend of mine. He was on my basketball team. We didn't become later friends until later in life, and he sort of got used to build to me. Our entire elementary, there was no bigger rivalry than hopan, and it was crazy because he was like the prettiest boy in blue fucking all blood German, blue eyes, bleach blonde hair. It looked like he could get any fucking girl he wanted. Like the guy that you see, like, have you seen Zach from Saved by the Bell? He was like him. And there was always conflict. For some reason, he had just such an animosity toward me, like such a rivalry, and with nobody else. And I never had him for any of my classes. He was in other classes, but I was really good friends with. I was friends with Drew at one point, and he was always around Drew, and I'd always be riding my bike, and I saw him, and anyway. So the story goes is he was riding in front of my house. And I talked about I was looking out the window, and he was looking at Ivan walk my sister. But at the time, I didn't know it was my sister. And I was just looking out there. And it wasn't like I was embarrassed or anything. I just happened to look out there, and I saw some kids riding around. I was like, that's hopan, Greenway, Micah, martinkus. It was like 2 houses past Miguel's house, Mickey's house. And they were way down there. And they were riding in circles. Have you ever seen Ku Klux Klans in fucking movies where the whites ride around in their fucking trucks and circle around the fucking race, if they're blacks or the Mexicans or Asians that they're going after? It was like that. I could never express, if there was ever in my time that I have ever been circled around by Ku Klux Klan members and maybe understood what that felt, that's exactly what it felt. Because I remember thinking of my father, because my father lived in that era of time. And they were riding around, and they were coming to taunt me, because they would come and try to come pick on me, and they didn't like that. There was times where I had to get in fights with all three of them at the same time, because I wasn't allowed to ride my bike because I was colored, because I was Mexican, and I would ride my bike to Good Elementary in sort of the area, and they would see me like he's in our territory. This is fuck that Mexican, and it was it was 100% prejudice, right? And there were times that they spit at me, like literally would get spit at me, like, and it was just. I think he grew up with hopan with a racist dad, and Drew Greenway was such a follower at that time. And Drew Greenway, if he confesses, will tell you. We're riding around. Micah martinkus will tell you too, right? He's a Christian now. He's the one that kicked in an old lady's door and broke into their house. And he was riding around, and they sort of got warded off, like a little bit. They did have stuck around for a couple minutes, and they were kind of like, because they were hoping that little girl was my sister, so they could find a reason to make fun of me for. And I knew I believe that's what it was. Because they always wanted to find a reason, because I had an old dad, and he was like, oh, your dad's an old geezer, or whatever. So, like, a couple days later passed by, and they do it again, and I remember this one time, I was around that same area where my sister was, and they tried to fight me. I remember they just got off the bike, Drew Greenway, and all of them were too scared to throw a punch for some reason. hopan was the only one that would, like, grab me and then kind of use his nails to dig into my flesh and shit. Like he'd grab me, do this, but none of them none of them could ball up a fist and really strike to the face. And I was willing to make contact. It was just like a shuffle scare. And they were attacking me, and there was no reason I hadn't done anything. Like, they just wanted to hate me. And Micah didn't really. There was such a follower of Andy. And later, this when I got older, and I got friends with Richard, and I got friends with Robert, and when things sort of changed, where colors were kind of, were a little bit different. We were getting involved in drugs and weed and shit, and it was kind of like a popular thing, or like a power thing. Like you had connections to people that knew crazy shit. And so I remember, being in 6th grade, and we were smoking a joint. It was like, oh, Hector, it's like, oh, you too, Hector. And I was with Robert Cerati. And he actually went to Robert Cerati's house many years ago. We were playing some knockout game or some shit. And but anyway, we ended up sort of being friends, and we played on the same basketball team, and we're cool. And I'd see his brother come to the basketball team, and it was a weird relationship because even before those incidents, I had some conversations about him with him, and he'd be on his red line bicycle, and it was just like a rivalry thing. I don't know how to sort of a rivalry thing with him. It was like he was. I don't understand. It was like a jealous thing, or like it was just weird because I'm like, why would anybody? I mean, this guy looks like Zach from Saved by the Bell. Why do you? What do you not see what you look like to fucking people? Is that not enough? And so anyway, I got into high school, and this is what I thought. Like every time I saw him in middle school and high school, I'd see him and he'd say hi, but nobody knew about this. Okay, so after that incident, about 8 months later, my dad committed suicide. Right after him riding around, and throughout 4th and 5th grade, they kind of picked on me and shit because I was Mexican. I was like the spick, and they called me spick and shit, spit at me. And so I was in 6th grade. My dad committed suicide, and it was like right when he came home after a suicide. And Andy Hopan, Micah, Martinkus, and Greenway were riding in front of my yard, right in the street, just like you see Ku Klux Klan members and like these the racist kids, right? And my dad was outside. And I remember just looking out the window. I looked out the window for a second, and they had no business being there. I knew every street and corner, knew who lived in every house, where all the kids lived, what roads they took to get home, to get to shortcuts, how they get to Brett Tippett's house, and what alleys they take, or they went over here, or they went over there. I knew everything, so I knew they were coming to like taunt me or make fun of me. And Andy Hopan, by himself, went over to my dad, and he had a conversation. And my dad was out there smoking a cigarette. My father was like brain dead, and he was like, what? And I remember he tried talking to him for like 5 minutes or a little, and he was just doesn't know where he is. And so he goes over to the street, and I found out this later, but before I finish this, he does it again. Like he waits again, and he and he talks to him, and then he comes back and he starts talking to him, and I open the door and I catch him, and he gets cold blood scared, and he goes, oh shit, because I knew that he was trying to make fun of my father, and I opened the door, leave him alone, don't pick on him, and when I opened the door, I heard my father, and he was sort of mumbling, and Andy Hopan was like, hey sir, are you okay? Or he didn't say okay, but he was saying something to him. And my dad was just sitting there completely lost, looking at my dad. And he was like, oh, what are you, what's going on? What? And he was just in this puppy, sad face. And he didn't know what was going on. And he was kind of smoking his cigarette. And he went back out, and I looked, and he went, and they kind of rode around a little bit, and then he sort of left, and I just kind of looked at Micah and Drew and how they were their security guards, and we can do whatever the fuck we want, that was his security guards, but they were kind of wussies, in my opinion. They weren't, they really didn't want to understand how to want to inflict pain, the way that I would have. But that was just when we were kids. But so future goes on, I can start middle school, and I see any hopan every now and then, and and I say kind of hello to him, and I really don't say much because it was kind of like that one moment that he talked to my dad, and I was like, and I looked at him, and it was kind of like I didn't say anything. Like, in my opinion, I think it sort of shook him a little bit because he came in contact with an old man that didn't know what the fuck was going on, and he was kind of like fucked up, and I was like, damn, I kind of feel bad for Hector. Like that, I knew that was kind of a little bit of the issue, and so this is whenever he meets Katy Perry, the famous singer. And one of the reasons that I think he told me about Katy Perry is because of that reason. It was kind of to sort of like, here, let me help you see, maybe, hook you up a little bit, man. Like, and because I was a basketball team with him, and his best friend, his ultimate best friend was Drew Greenway, which was his childhood friend of all time, and they were always together. They were like brother. They were never left anywhere without each other. And he died, right? And so whenever I'm making me pass gas again. He ended up dying, and everybody knew about it. But the day that I was walking to my class and he told me about Katy Perry, he told me, he's like, hey, she's a singer, you should get with her, And he had said something, and it was very unusual because remember, he was kind of racist, and Katy Perry was a white girl. But I remember him telling me that, and I knew immediately when he did that. I thought to myself, that's kind of fucking weird. I thought that was kind of weird that he said something to me. And he said, because I knew it was the race thing, but he was like offering me her kind of. And I was like, what are you? I didn't say anything or react, but I knew mentally, and I don't know if it had something to do because I was already hanging around some white other kids, Richard Murphy, John Basile. And so I wasn't sure exactly why that was. But I do recall that was the circumstance. And he had said to me, and it was weird, he mentioned Susie Kelly. For those that don't know Susie Kelly, I was in Perry, DeWitt Perry. He went to DeWitt Perry for a little while, and he'd always pass by me. He goes, hey, man. He goes, hey, this girl, DeWitt, this girl, Susie Kelly? She goes to my church, man. She's like, you know who she is? You do? And she would bring her up in front of me. And I was like, Susie, this is Susie Kelly, the girl I used to have the biggest crush on when I was younger. And so, anyway, that was kind of that circumstance. And but when I saw Katy Perry, and it was her. I'm pretty sure it was her. She was would hug him in class, and he's the one that told me about her. And he probably saw me because he saw me checking her out, but I thought that was maybe his girl. I thought that was his girlfriend or something, because he used to have every single hot girl on him, and the prettiest girls in the entire school, every single one of them. And but yeah, I thought I'd make that video to discuss that a little bit. And weird thing is that I remember Katy Perry, she had a bunch of keys on a table, and she knew that I was walking home, because it was so weird. I'd take every time I'd walk, I'd take a different area, or a different shortcut, but I always led to the same few roads to get to my house. She'd be right there. I'd take 15 minutes late, and it was just by random. It was some of the weirdest, craziest shit. She was right there. And so she saw me walking, and when I go to class, she'd be like, oh, that's a kid that's walking. I see him. He's always checking me out. And she put the keys on the table to let me know that maybe, hey, I can maybe give you a ride home. That it's an offering. Like the body language, the whole vibe, 100,000%. And I recall her putting the keys intentionally and then kind of grabbing them and kind of like maybe I could probably give you a ride home if you need a ride home, you know, or something like that. And I remember that. And one of the reasons I remember those keys, all these different types of keys, is because I went to get my driver's license, and there was a girl that did that same exact thing. And I don't think I mentioned that in my other video, so I know Katy Perry must have mentioned that. And I thought that was weird, but I remember that happening. But like I said, you know, I'm not here to persecute or say anything bad about, you know, that kid. You know, he was a friend of mine, and even though that there was a tug of war of different barriers, and it's no longer alive. He got killed in a motorcycle accident many years ago. But I remember he approached my dad. Now, you don't want to hear it, right? Because sometimes kids do bad things and then they die young. And there's no way for them to defend themselves or say whatever or say sorry. It's the same thing with me or anyone else. But that's what happened. And I remember that. I remember that very vividly. I felt very offended at that time to a very high level degree because my dad was mumbling in front of this most popular kid, you know, like didn't know what the fuck was going on. In fact, it kind of shook him. Like it looked like, in my opinion, like he either came in contact with his grandpa or someone in his life that probably had something like that or knew, and I think he noticed that my dad was lost and maybe he made an approach, which was very gutsy of him. And he literally went to my front porch and was like trying to talk to my dad. I've never had one friend ever in my life just go approach my dad to really want to have a conversation with the way that kind of played out in that particular way. But I thought I'd make a video on that, you know. And I remember, like I said, I remember this instinctively. Like I remember fighting all three of them in the middle of the street. And like Andy came at me at one angle, and then Drew came at me at one angle, and he kind of just like to shove my head, and I stuck out my head to hit him sort of a distance from his sort of face to get him away from me, to sort of be more violent. That I would try to defend myself, and then Micah would then get off his bike, like want to fight or whatever, and I remember very distinctively thinking of this Mexican girl because it was right where there was a lot of vegetation right where it happened. There's this one particular house that had like all these leaves and flowers and shit, had all this kind of shit there. I think it was like the Howard family, they call them. There was an old lady that lived there. It was like a lesbian and shit, my mother used to tell me. And she, and I remember very distinctively, like almost feeling like I was sort of doing this sort of defense for this Mexican girl because it was like a Mexican thing. It was like a colored thing, at least at that moment in time. But it's very weird I know that, you know, like I was later friends with him in life, and it didn't escalate that to just a couple of times. It wasn't until I started bridging a bunch of relationships with other friends that, you know, I became more of a threat, more intimidating because I had connections deeper that were more dangerous at times and saw the world different. So things ended up sort of getting balanced. But I would see him at my soccer games, you know, I'd see him all my practices. You know, it's not something I particularly was the best experiences, but we never had very much of any problems in my basketball. Like, he'd see me show up on my first basketball, like, oh man, Hector's on the fucking team. But yeah, we were on the fucking team, like, and I remember him, you know, I think, in my opinion, to my understanding, he was very racist, like fucking Ku Klux Klan fucking racist. Like, I can't remember who it was that told me this, but he was particularly just like hardcore, not just a little bit, like fucking full-blown racist against like blacks and any other colors as well. Anyway, I thought I'd make a video, and I remember that it was a long time ago, but I sort of wanted to elaborate that a little bit. It was weird because I think he felt sorry for me. I really did. I really think he felt sorry for me, and that's why, because he wouldn't have told me. I knew him and the vibes and how. I never walked into his house, but I knew some of the network. Like I went to Chris Kemp's house. I'd never been to Drew Greenway's house as a kid, maybe once in his front yard. But I knew that the sort of circle of ins and outs to the white boys. That the rich white boys, as we refer them to as. And anyway, I thought I'd make a video about that, and life moved on. So, but I remember, my father grew up in such a racist time where I remember just standing out there in the front porch and understanding when like the rivalry of the white supremacist shows up and they start circling like vultures. You ever seen vultures? They sort of how they circle over the heads of their potential targets. And they sort of like that. That's exactly what it was looking like. They were just coasting on their bikes in circles and shit like this. Again, right in front of our street, like right in the middle of the street in front of our house. And thinking that my dad had to go through this type of stuff his entire life. And my dad went through the real deal. My father was so old and so conscious throughout his life that I understood that from the very person it was happening when, you can't walk into bathrooms, drink from a fountain, clean fountains, you can't do any of that. And so I understood that very well. So anyway, I thought I'd make a video on that. Try to finish these chips. But anyway, yeah, so as far as it goes, I'm not trying to make anything, I was friends with him later in life, and I really believed he felt sorry for me, because he wouldn't have said that to me, like he was trying to hook me up or something, like hook me up with a girl. And he mentioned it to Katy, like when he told me, he was like, yeah, dude, you should get, he was I swear to God, he's the one that told me that she could sing. But he did tell me, he goes, hey, yeah, that girl, she's fucking crazy, dude. She's like really, really fucking crazy. That girl's crazy. He goes, she like transferred to Turner for like and went to somewhere else or like graduated early or some shit. But he told me that she transferred to like, I think R.O. Turner, which is the famous Katy Perry of the school. The famous Katy Perry singer. But anyway, I thought I'd make a video on that. He was the one that told me and was like, yeah, man, he goes, you should talk to her, dude. She's a great singer. You DJ, right, man? That's some really cool shit. You DJ. He was like, oh, go talk to her. I was young at that time. Little did I know I was going to be in the medical field later in life, and I'd have any regrets and do other things that are more important in life. But anyway, I thought I'd make a video. Hopefully this elaborates enough. And yeah, Sylvester's family. He was it was wild because so much as this I was able to observe is how people think they know somebody because of their color. The same way the blacks do it. You ever seen how blacks talk one another and they like fucking just met each other and shit the other day for the first time, yet they hug each other and give handshakes like they're fucking been best friends for fucking 20 years, and it's like they start talking in their black secret codes and shit. That's exactly, what I'm talking about, and that I saw with how much of like, I would watch people that didn't go to school with him and they were just like best friends and shit. They grew up as kids in diapers and shit. And I'm like, this guy was hanging around Drew all the time. I was like, who the fuck are you? And they would be very defensive of him, and they didn't know who the fuck. They didn't go to my school and nothing. Anyway, I thought I'd make a video, and kind of tell you kind of went on, and because so much of a lot of shit that goes on. I still don't know the details of that, whatever anybody got or anything like that. I don't know anything. But I'm 42 years old, so yeah. So pictures of one friend. It was very surprising to me when he did that, you know, because he was like the GQ kid. I mean, he looked like Zach. I mean, he looked like Zach Slater and shit from Saved by the Bell. It's exactly what it looked like. You know, like, it's kind of like a blueprint of him a little bit. Same hair color, eye color, frame, popular sort of, you know, but everybody wanted to be drawn to him because he was just like, you know, whatever, but anyway, so yeah, that's the story.